Keys?
Yep, you can use the arrow keys.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Al Vandenbrink, Chair of the Yampa-White-Green Basin Roundtable. It's an organization I've been involved with now for right at 10 years, and I've had the pleasure of getting a lot of information from this group, but also to learn how our Northwest Colorado basins work. So we've got several guest speakers that have been well affiliated with the Yampa-White-Green Basin Roundtable tonight. That'll be presenting as well. And I'll be touching base on the basin implementation plan that we're working on right now. And to start, there we go. Just a second, you're not sharing. Go ahead, keep going. Just a brief introduction into what the Basin Roundtable is. It's one of 9 grassroots water policy roundtables throughout Colorado, working to develop locally driven collaborative solutions to water supply challenges. Right now, there's 32 members on our Basin Roundtable, and each one is an expert in their own realm. And it ranges from your average citizen, agriculture, environmental, municipalities, recreation, and it involves attorneys, landowners, just a strong variety of people. So it makes for a good variety of groups, folks to give their opinions as we go through these challenging water processes going on in Northwest Colorado and our state. So, and one of the biggest pieces that we're working on right now is our basin implementation plan. And there's other pieces to this. So in 2015, we did develop the Hickenlooper developed the state water plan, and the basin implementation plan is the Yampa-White-Green's portion of the state water plan. And I think somebody else, Jackie Brown, who is our representative, you're fine, just leave it right there. Okay. Jackie Brown is our representative to the CWCB, and she will be discussing more of that. So, working through some technical difficulties here, folks. So, sorry. Okay. To kind of really kick us off into our basin implementation plan, or BIP, just as another acronym for you to learn. I think it's important for us to kind of identify some of the goals that we as a Basin Roundtable identified as within our first BIP that we developed. And that's protection against compact curtailment. We all know the risk that Northwest Colorado has. And that's not just the Yampa River, but also the Snake and the White River. So, and we also have the Green River. So, but we've identified that. Protection of ag water supplies. Address M&I shortage, municipal and industrial source shortages. Quantify and protect non-consumptive uses at locations identified in non-consumptive needs study. Maintain and consider water quality for current and anticipated water uses. Restore, maintain, and modernize water storage and distribution infrastructure. Develop integrated water systems for water use, storage, administration, and delivery to reduce water shortages and help meet environmental and recreation needs. These really guide us as we have our conversations with that large group of people. And we do bring these up quite frequently, just to remind ourselves to what our goals are. And someone else there. Patrick, how do I go to the next page? The arrow's not working. Thank you. So as we're developing the basin implementation plan, the update, because we did our first one, and the first update, it took thousands of hours from a group of people ranging in size from 9 sometimes up to 15. So what this basin implementation update does, it addresses the need to retain the share of native flows for existing uses and future development. that's always stressed, because we're going to keep growing here as a basin, and water needs are going to continue to increase. The need to preserve the natural hydrology for environmental and recreation uses. The need for appropriately located, sized, and operated projects to protect water uses and the environment, particularly during drought. And we've all seen how these droughts are becoming more and more frequent. And most recently, the state of Colorado has identified that there's portions of Colorado that have seen temperature increases of, in the past 100 years, between 2 to 2.5 degrees centigrade. That's a pretty significant effect when you're looking at the hydrology and how that impacts how the growing season is, seasonal runoff, snow lines in the mountains, and so on and so forth. And the need to consider and to address all of these within the Basin Roundtable process. I guess one of the biggest important things that we strive for within our Basin Roundtable is to build upon consensus. And we'll beat subjects up, and this is one of those subjects that we're going to be beating up. And below I have, you can kind of see there, we have types of projects being discussed. This is a preliminary project list. It's not finalized, but it's what's been gathered. These are just examples. Right now, the list is approaching 50 identified projects, but that's not just indicative to the Yampa Basin or the Snake, but also to the White River. And so what we're doing, we're actually identifying specific projects throughout our Yampa-White-Green Basin Roundtable of significant importance. And each project, as we move along with this BIP process, will be vetted. They'll get beat up, and we'll see what is feasible to move forward and include within our basin implementation plan. Within the Yampa River, you can see there's several in there, but a couple, I'm not going to touch on them all, is compact matters. That's a pretty significant item and question going on here, and concern for the Yampa River. Myself, I'm not impacted by that as much as you all are, but I do understand the situation that could have. And I just lost my screen here. Let's see if we can go back here. Got it. Okay. One of the other processes that you'll see going on, and this has been ongoing now, I believe this is in like the second year of it, or perhaps the third, is an integrated water management plan. The state of Colorado came forward, I believe 2 years ago, maybe perhaps 3, that identified 80% of all the primary tributaries in Colorado to be covered under stream management plans. The Yampa River folks that are part of the Yampa-White-Green Basin Roundtable took it upon themselves to facilitate an integrated water management plan for the Yampa Basin. Kudos to them. And I'll tell you what, it's good to see them develop this plan and include the public as part of this process. So the Basin Roundtable is there to support and encourage and to help them in whatever fashion we can to develop their integrated water management plan. The White River is doing something very similar. It's just not quite as advanced as what they are with the Yampa Integrated Water Management Plan. So to give you a couple other examples of what's happening within the Yampa-White-Green as other projects are developed, I know within the White River, and I know this is the Yampa River, but there's potential for these projects to overlap. There's been someone flagged out that there should be ag lands of significant value be identified. Because we know through some of our research that we found within Moffat County, some additional agricultural lands that if water would be applied, it would be valuable ground. It could raise a crop and perhaps increase agricultural productivity. We've also identified and had people come talk to me and realize I'm talking from Rio Blanco County there. But that doesn't mean I don't do outreach to the Yampa River folks, where they come talk to me about ag reservoirs. And I know right now one of our guest speakers tonight is working on a reservoir that is ag water that does have some issues. But we've identified that there's significant agricultural reservoirs out there that need to have a fair amount of maintenance and upkeep. And we're trying to inventory how much maintenance, what are we looking at for cost? What type of maintenance are we looking at? And are we looking at permitting to get done here? What's all involved here? We don't know. But when you look at that ag water reservoirs, we also all know as agriculture that there's some value to that water being stored, as how it just retimes the water, but elongates the watering season. It helps green up some of our areas as well to increase agriculture. So with that, I'm going to kind of wrap up my piece on the Basin Implementation Plan. I know we've got a few other folks going to take on to other subjects here. So Phil, do you want, or questions here?
So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and save questions. We'll have, if you are ready, I will just introduce you. Jackie Brown wears several hats as well. She is the Water and Natural Resource Policy Advisor, I believe, to the Tri-State Energy Association. She also serves as an at-large representative on the Yampa-White-Green Basin Roundtable, and she also serves on the Colorado Water Conservation Board. Jackie, do I have all those things correct?
Sounds good to me. Good. So thanks, Al, for that great localized presentation on the Colorado Water Plan update. And as Al mentioned, the first Colorado Water Plan was finalized in 2015 under Governor Hickenlooper. And so while each basin is working on their own basin implementation plan, the state is also looking at drilling into the new draft of the Colorado Water Plan. And I think that's really important because the first version in 2015 was the first water plan that Colorado had ever had. And it was a bit rushed to get that plan out. We only had 2 years as a state to finish that up. And, I think we've all learned a lot since 2015, clearly, in the times we're in now. And so this next iteration will be an opportunity for the state and all of the local basins to refine that 2015 plan and change some of the information in there goal-wise that maybe isn't working or needs some additional fat on the bones. So what I wanted to talk about is the phasing of the plan update. But since this is an ag update, I also wanted to just drill into the ag portion of the plan. And I think it's important for all to know that in the initial plan that came out in 2015, the only goal attached to agriculture was the addition of ATM, so this ag transfer method, and how can we prevent buy and dry by giving agriculture other options to work with municipalities and other water providers or water users, excuse me, as demands increase in other sectors. And so I think it's a great time here in 2020 to take a look at what goals agriculture could have in the Colorado Water Plan that maybe aren't attached to the other industries, such as municipalities, primarily municipalities. And I know that maybe staff has reached out to some of the ag groups in the past and in the past 6 months and just tried to discuss this and maybe it didn't go over so well. But what I envision is that this is a great opportunity for ag to say, here are our goals as agriculturalists for the next 5 years. Here's what the money that's set aside for the Colorado Water Plan through the legislature could be spent on, and here's how we'd like to see it spent. Of course, we all know that there's been pretty big budget impacts to the state budget right now, but there still is funding for the water plan, and there will continue to be funding for the water plan into the future, most likely, even if it is reduced during these harder times that we're experiencing right now. And so that said, one idea that comes to mind, and I think is complementary to some of the things Al was talking about before, is infrastructure. So nowhere in the water plan does it say that one of the goals is to help agriculture improve infrastructure up and down the ditch or the canal, or the irrigation district. And I know the river district and other entities, Upper Yampa Water Conservancy District, Maybell Irrigation District, have worked to get some state funding and match that with some of their own funding and some additional funding to help with these projects. But I think that it would be important to hear if that is something that folks in agriculture would like to see continue, and if it makes sense to have that as a goal, and what other goals are out there that that would be feasible to work on in the next 5 years, and how do we build a platform to be able to do that with money and staff time. So I wanted to just take a deeper dive into that, and there may be some questions on that. I'd be happy to answer them, I guess, after I finish up this update. And so we'll move forward. So as part of the water plan outreach, and COVID timing, the CWCB has created, hang on, shut the window, excuse me. The CWCB has created a new online community outreach website that right now has 2 things on it, and one of those is the continuing demand management outreach site, and so how you can sign up for demand management updates, and I know we're going to talk about that in a little bit here. But then additionally, they have a new tool called the Drought Virtual Tour, and I'm not sure how many of you all have heard about that, but it is the effort of CWCB alongside some of the other agencies that work with the governor's staff and their drought task force to learn about how drought is impacting other all people across the entire state, and allow people to tell their stories and what the hard times have been like for them, how they're dealing with them, support that they would like to see from any state agencies, if any. And then this will be put into I think it's going to ultimately be a video, but it's also going to be some report outs that will be seen by the legislature and by the governor, so that we can bring back some important options as we deal with this drought. And as I think, you know, Al mentioned, and we'll talk about more tonight, as the supply, you know, continues to dwindle, as we see that it most likely will from all the studies that we've been doing in recent years. So I think that's really important. The email address, if you'd like to share your story, or if you and a few neighbors have a story to share, is drought@state.co.us, and I will just type it up in the chat field as well. And finally, just to give you all an idea of what the timing is for the new Colorado Water Plan. So right now, we just finished up getting the different basins set up to do their basin implementation plan. And then starting in October, so in a few days, and through June of 2021, there will be a staff discussion on how best to do targeted public engagement on the updates of the water plan and what that's going to look like, especially with COVID, how we can make sure that we're getting all the input we would normally get from CWCB staff, having the resources and the ability to get around the state and have these conversations, what that's going to look like. And then that engagement will take place through June of 2021. So hopefully plenty of options, especially this winter, to get out and talk about that. And then in July of 2021 through March of 2022, there will be a draft of the water plan, and the CWCB board, the one that I sit on, and I know looking at the names here, I think I saw Curran Trick of the Walden area. She's listening in as well. She's the North Park representative. So the board will begin to engage and give us some input on what that draft looks like. And then April of 2022 through December of 2022 will be public comment, just like we did the first round. And then the final plan will go to the governor after that. So that's a bit of a time frame of what we're looking at to get this accomplished. And I just really thank you for your time and listening to me drone on, and my dog's barking, my kid banging on the door. So appreciate it.
This is going to go on. So we're going to show a video that the Integrated Water Management Plan for the Yampa has done on the Elkhead Creek restoration.
And water management plan for the Bear, Elk, and Yampa rivers. It will combine science and engineering assessments with stakeholder input to identify voluntary projects and strategies to protect existing and future water uses and support healthy river ecosystems both today and in the future. The Lower Elkhead Creek Restoration Project is an example of the kind of project that the Integrated Water Management Plan will identify and help spur towards action. Projects that are good for both the river's health and water users are not new on the Yampa River, but the Yampa-White-Green Basin Roundtable wants to help kickstart even more of them to protect against an uncertain future. My name is Caitlin Bowe, and I am Drought Unlimited's Yampa-White River Basin Project Coordinator and a partner biologist for the Natural Resources Conservation Service, NRCS. Elkhead Creek is a tributary to the Yampa River located northeast of the city of Craig. Since the 19th century, it has been used predominantly for hay production and livestock grazing. Lower Elkhead Creek is a 9-mile stretch located downstream of Elkhead Reservoir. The reservoir was built in the 1970s to provide water for many different uses, including the endangered fish recovery program.
My name is Keith Pankey. I've been on the creek for 69 years plus. This is my Uncle Winfield. He's been on the creek a long time, so about 87 years. This is where we raise our hay, and this is where we winter our livestock.
I'm Tim O'Neill. This is my wife, Lane O'Neill, and we've lived here at the ranch here for 5 years. We're raising cattle here, a herd of Wagyu. In addition, we like to use it recreationally. So we've actually put some fish in the water, and we enjoy fishing.
Hi, my name is Lorraine Katchek, and this is my son, Blaine. Our family has lived out here on Elkhead Creek for 20 years.
I'd say the biggest issues we've noticed out here is the erosion of the banks, especially in the springtime during high water. We're losing, over the 28 years, we've lost quite a bit of ground to erosion just being washed away because of the high water.
There's a lot of erosion. Late summer, I cannot irrigate, use my water rights because of the structure being so far down the creek. And without the creek, without the hay, we're not able to raise livestock.
The proposed restoration work here on Lower Elkhead Creek has been a multi-purpose, multi-benefit project from the beginning. There's, of course, the agricultural component of protecting ag, infrastructure, water rights, and operations here in the Lower Elkhead Creek Valley. There's also an environmental component, and we're trying to restore the riparian corridor and improve in-stream aquatic habitat and water quality. Planned restoration efforts on Lower Elkhead Creek will include regrading vertical banks, installing tow rock, log veins, and other woody material, planting native riparian vegetation, and working together with landowners to fence off riparian areas from livestock until fully reestablished.
The ultimate goal is to have it restored and as healthy as can be. So identifying, hey, that we can all work together. The water, the improvement of the water works for everyone. but we then have our own specific needs of what we would like to do.
A goal for us in the future is to have some habitat improvement and a shelter for the fish and the wildlife, the birds that we see here, and improving the whole river, not just our section, but up and down, knowing that it will improve the whole waterway.
We've seen incredible support come out of not only our local community here in Northwest Colorado, but from state and federal agencies as well. The City of Craig, Tri-State, and the Colorado River District have all committed funding to this project. And we've also received support from Colorado Parks and Wildlife, the Yampa-White-Green Basin Roundtable, and CWCB, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and the NRCS. This support and investment into the project has been critical, not only for moving this project forward, but helping to share the financial burden with those individual landowners who have been most affected by these ongoing issues.
We could not do a project like this on our own. It is very expensive, and without the help and the resources that are out there, we could not do this project on our own. They have been very instrumental in helping us seek funds to work on our banks and get this project going.
We have been, for the last 30 years, voicing our concerns, and we have finally got a hold of the right people, the right agencies that are willing to help us.
Through this IWMP process, and once we identify projects, we can strategically coordinate funding and help streamline the planning and implementation process and help individuals or groups wanting to get these projects done actually get projects in the ground. The Lower Elkhead Creek Restoration Project is an example of the kind of project that the Integrated Water Management Plan will identify and help spur towards action. You can learn more about the work of the Yampa-White-Green Basin Roundtable and its Integrated Water Management Plan at yampawhitegreen.com.
You can enter Jason.
Okay. So our next speaker is Jason Turner. Jason is senior counsel with the Colorado River District. He also serves on Denver Sturm College of Law Water Law Review, and he's also the current chair of the Colorado River Basin Roundtable. So busy guy. And Jason is going to be talking with us about the drought contingency planning as well as changes to stockwater right recognition. Jason.
Thanks, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I am actually going to take a moment and I'm going to play you another video. And it's basically just a little bit of information about the Colorado River District, and hopefully it'll explain a little bit why we got involved in these stock watering issues.
On Colorado's western slope, water is everything. From high atop the Rocky Mountains to the Grand Valley and beyond, these waters have shaped our history. They form the backbone of our rural economies, and they have sustained generations of hard-working families. Since 1937, the Colorado River District has been safeguarding western slope water for agriculture, for recreation, for industry, and for the environment.
We were formed 82 years ago to give voice and protection to the needs of the river and the people and the communities that depend on it.
We run a cow-calf operation for the ranch, and we supplement our income through running a fly fishing guided outfitter. The water is what matters to all of us and what we all need. The river river is in a tug-of-war state between consumptive use and non-consumptive needs. For irrigation diversion projects associated with agriculture, we need cool, clean water. Trout fishermen downstream needs cool, clean water. The river district acts as a great intermediary between all of those needs. The river is what binds us all.
Whether you're a rancher in Moffat County or a boater in Summit County, you depend upon the Colorado River. And getting people to recognize their common interests and the leverage we have when we speak with one voice is what the Colorado River District does.
People just don't realize how valuable the River District is. By bringing us together, we all of a sudden understood this was our river, and what was good for one of us was good for both of us. It's an opportunity that the West Slope has to have a strong voice. And if the people of the West Slope don't recognize that, the Colorado River and all its tributaries that we love and what brought us here is going to go away too. We're either in it together or we're going down one at a time.
You take the environmental needs for the river and you realize what's important for the environment. Those same exact things are important for ag. They're important for industry, and they're very important for recreation.
10% of our gross domestic product is outdoor recreation. People that like to paddle on rivers also like to eat Palisade peaches and live here. The River District is doing a great job changing the framework to be one of collaboration.
On the West Slope, water is the lifeblood of this community. Our water and our ability to serve agricultural producers and industrial consumers, the municipalities, we all depend on having water in the river, and no one wants to see a dry river. Without water, you take that out of the picture, you have nothing.
Without the River District, the West Slope would be a very different place. We'd have less water in our rivers, we'd have less agriculture, less of an economic engine that is recreation.
I can't survive as an ag business if I don't have my water. The role of the River District is to work with entities around our basin in a cohesive way to accomplish the local goals as well as the Western Colorado goals as far as protecting our natural resource and making sure that water is used correctly.
The River District has managed over the years to fight the Front Range and the Trans Mountain diverters. We're able to bring a voice through the table and present that united front that is so important at keeping water in our rivers flowing westward.
The next generation is here. My grandsons are growing up here. We've got to make sure that they have the same chance that my daughter did, who's now here, and that I have from my dad. The whole West Slope, to me, is a natural resource-based economy, and water is number one in that natural resource. And how do we manage that so that the next generation has the same joy that we have?
For more than 80 years, one entity has been working to keep West Slope water on the western slope. These are your rivers. This is your water. And this is your Colorado River District.
Oops. A nice cameo appearance from Miss Jackie Brown there in our video. I've got a couple of facts about the River District that I'll leave up while I start talking about this. It is a pleasure to be back here. I think I was at the Colorado Cattlemen's summer conference in, would have been 2019, talking about this issue, and it's nice to actually report that we made some progress, which doesn't always happen in the water business all the time. I think it was about 2015 or 2016, the River District was contacted by ranchers here in Routt County, as well as the Colorado Cattlemen's Association, because their water rights, particularly stock watering rights in the fall, were being curtailed. For decades, those ranches had operated diverting those stock water rights, diverting their irrigation rights, which they assumed covered stock watering. There's a little bit of a change in administration, and those water rights started getting curtailed, specifically by the in-stream flow rights. And so we convened a number of meetings with the state engineer's office, representatives of the Colorado Water Conservation Board, Colorado Cattlemen's, Routt County Cattlemen's, and we were fairly convinced that the statute, that the in-stream flow statute, provided that these water rights could continue to divert because they were prior practices that were in existence before the CWCB in-stream flow. It's kind of an interesting, it's interesting in Colorado law because, as you all know, we follow the prior appropriation doctrine, and water rights are administered by their priority date. Now, the argument coming from the division engineer's office were these water rights were not decreed for stock watering purposes, they were decreed for irrigation uses. So that stock watering purpose wasn't allowed under the decrees. And we said, well, but wait, we've got this statute that specifically allows that to go on as a pre-existing use. It predates the in-stream flow. That was the bargain that was made in the 1970s when the in-stream flow statute was passed. And initially, we had a pretty good response from the state engineer's office, and we worked for about a year kind of back and forth on how we were going to resolve this. And then the state engineer's office actually shared some of that with the attorney general's office. And this might come as a shock to many of you, but lawyers don't always agree with each other. And we had a difference of opinion about what that statute meant. Tremendous respect for the AG's office, but we definitely had a difference of opinion about what that statute meant. We thought it was pretty clear. But in any event, their position was that because the statute did not specifically say that the state engineer had the authority to determine whether these were pre-existing uses, that you did in fact need to go to water court and have them confirmed. Our concern with that process was that, you know, water court's a lengthy process, it can be costly. This is something that had been going on for decades. So we all kind of got together and put our heads together, and we went down and had conversations with the CWCB, and thanks to some great leadership on the part of Jackie Brown at the CWCB, and also Colorado Cattlemen's, DNR, we were able to all get together and draft some legislation to make clear that the state engineer's office had the authority to determine whether these stock watering rights pre-existed the in-stream flows. And in 2020, we had some bipartisan legislation, which was House Bill 2011-59, with sponsors Roberts and Catlin in the House and Donovan and Quorum in the Senate. And I think we were incredibly lucky. We went very early in the legislative session this year, because as you know, the legislature was out for a long time due to COVID. But in fact, we had this bill passed before they ever went on their recess. So timing was kind of everything with this one. And so what that statute does is, as I said, it makes it clear that the state engineer's office has the authority to determine whether that use of water pre-existed the in-stream flow. And some of the information, and I'm not sure whether anybody's used this statute yet. I would kind of doubt it. Like I said, it's fairly new, and these stock watering rights were in particular getting curtailed after the irrigation season. So we'll kind of see what happens this year. And if anybody takes advantage of the statute, at the River District, I'd love to hear about how the process went. But I would suspect that some of the things the state engineer's office is going to be looking for are affidavits from the irrigator. You know, I've used this. I witnessed my grandfather using this for stock watering purposes. Any historical records you might have, diversion records, photographs. In fact, a lot of times big help can be your water commissioners on your ditch, because they know what the practices have been for years. We did have a number of water commissioners that told us, oh yeah, these guys have been diverting this for stock watering for years, because they knew how the ditches operated. The legislation also provides that if either party, whether that's the Colorado Water Conservation Board, which holds the in-stream flow, or the water user disagree with the determination that the state engineer's office has made, they do have the ability to take that to water court. And it's a de novo hearing. And what that means is you start over. Whatever the determination that the state engineer made really doesn't have a whole lot of weight with the water court. They can look at it all independently and make a determination on their own about whether this was a pre-existing use. It is important to note, though, that this, shall I let Commissioner Munger in? Yeah. All right. It is important to note that this pre-existing use statute only applies against an in-stream flow. So if there is a junior user and they want to place a call based on the theory that you don't have a stock watering right because it's only decreed for irrigation, they can still do that. This will protect you only against the in-stream flow, and which is another reason that we also provided in the statute that nothing would stop you from going in and actually adjudicating and getting a water right and decree for your pre-existing stock water use. And I guess we're going to wait for questions towards the end. That's all I have on that issue.
Just go. Steve, I've got this next slide, right? So.
Do you want me just to roll into?
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thought I had another slide there. So now we're going to change gears a little bit, and we're going to talk about drought contingency planning, which was discussed earlier in terms of the state's efforts. As you've all heard, I've got a map there of the Colorado River Basin, the Upper Basin and the Lower Basin. Shows the locations of Lake Mead and Lake Powell, and as we've all heard recently, the levels in both are incredibly low. So back in 2017, the Department of Interior called on the 7 Colorado River Basin states, that's Arizona, California, Colorado, Wyoming, Utah, New Mexico, and Nevada, to put drought contingency plans in place. The Colorado River Drought Contingency Plan was submitted to Congress by the states in March of 2019. And for those of us that think nothing happens in Congress, this is actually pretty amazing, because by April of 2019, the legislation directing the Secretary of Interior to effectuate those drought contingency plans was approved by Congress. So in a matter of a month, kind of speaks to the importance of Colorado River and all of the users on the river, for sure. It's important to note that there is a lower basin drought contingency planning effort and an upper basin drought contingency planning effort. The lower basin drought contingency plan actually mandates reductions in consumptive use. They need to cut back on the amount of water they're using. The drought contingency plan in the upper division states, which are Colorado, Wyoming, Utah, and New Mexico, is essentially a feasibility study for the most part. And demand management is defined as the temporary, voluntary, compensated reduction of consumptive use. One of the pieces of the drought contingency planning was the demand managed storage agreement. And what that agreement allows for is, if the upper division states do determine that demand management is appropriate in their states and appropriate for their water users, it would allow them to store up to 500,000 acre feet in Lake Powell for compact compliance purposes. And this would be water that is set aside in Lake Powell. It's not released on a yearly basis pursuant to the compact. It's not considered system water. It's almost, in the lower basin, they call it conserved consumptive use. So it would provide for that 500,000 acre foot bucket in Powell. I want to point out that that storage space is available, but the drought management storage agreement does not require any of the upper division states to adopt a demand management plan. So currently, each one of the upper division states are going through their own processes about whether demand management makes sense for their state. The CWCB in the state of Colorado, the Colorado Water Conservation Board, Jackie Brown is your representative there, is the entity that's been working on that, and they've set up a number of work groups on demand management. And another important piece of that is that for a demand management program to go forward in the upper division states, you need your state to approve it, and you need all of the other upper division states to approve it, as well as the Upper Colorado River Commission, the UCRC, which is kind of a governing body. Each one of the states has a representative, as well as the federal government on that, and that's was set up as part of the Upper Colorado River Compact. So, you know, demand management in the state of Colorado is not a mandate. The state is still studying it, and as I noted, not only would the state of Colorado need to approve it, but each of the upper division states, as well as the UCRC as a whole. So with that, I will probably leave it there, and I'll let some others talk about the demand management process here in the state of Colorado. So thanks again for your time. I appreciate it.
I think she's going to jump. I'm Will Myers. I'm the ag representative on the Basin Roundtable, and Jason just gave a really good lead in to demand management. For us, the Roundtable, it's usually Tom Gray and Jeff Myers who keep us up to date on demand management and just discuss that. And you're really missing out if you haven't heard Jeff give a presentation lately. He does a really good job, but we'll see what I can do. And pointed out, the Drought Contingency Plan has been federally mandated. I won't go into this too much because he already touched on it, but we need to come up with something because there's a persistent drought, and also there's increased demand for the water in the Colorado River system. We see that coming. So the Drought Contingency Plan is probably necessary going forward. The main goal of the Drought Contingency Plan is to avoid a compact column in the Colorado River. That'd be major stuff if that ever happened. So the four elements that we mainly discuss in terms of the Drought Contingency Plan are reoperating these Colorado River system project reservoirs, which include Flaming Gorge, I believe Blue Mesa, Navajo, and Glen Canyon Dam. And the idea with those is to maybe discharge some water from them to see if we could fill up Lake Powell a little bit more. You see we have this, it's called the 35-25 problem. And what that basically is I believe that's the elevation where the lowest elevation that Lake Powell can get to before they can stop producing power. Someone correct me if I'm wrong on that, Jackie, or okay, so it sounds like that's right.
That's right.
And so the idea is to keep that level at least in Lake Powell if we can. Some other elements of the drought contingency plan are cloud seeding, riparian vegetation management, mostly in terms of tamarask. But the one that we focus mainly on in the Basin Roundtable is demand management. And as Jason pointed out, we are definitely in the feasibility stage of this. There's a lot of questions and a lot of concerns that need to be addressed. But the point is we need to be proactive and look into it, because it might be a pretty real reality at some point in time that we need to get off the ground. So my oversimplified definition, I think, of demand management is that water users would be paid to not use or to conserve their water and allow it to be passed downstream in contribution towards meeting Colorado River Compact obligations. And Jason did a really good job, so I won't reread the context of this, but basically that's where it fits in there is, you know, people could participate in this and they'd be compensated for conservation, basically. So the principles of demand management that we're talking about that are currently in discussion right now is if it helps to avoid a compact call, demand management can be beneficial for ag, provided that it does not harm ag water users or rural communities. It's implemented fairly in every basin in the Colorado River system does its share. I think it's important to note that in our basin anyways, I think we use some of the least amount of our native flow, so that I mean, we're going to be looked to maybe contribute more than others, but I think that needs to be in the conversation of what's fair. You know, I mean, are we obligated to deliver more than other basins who are maybe over appropriated more than we are? There needs to be some mechanism to ensure that large municipal and speculative water interests don't dominate this program. Rec and environmental, they need to be protected. If these are harmed, ag will usually end up the loser if that's the case. We need a mechanism to see that the value of ag water leased for demand management purposes is fair. Trans-mountain diversions and conservation by trans-mountain diversion supplied water users are accounted for. And Jeff Myers and I had a discussion about this, and he pointed out that a trans-mountain diversion actually becomes part of the Colorado River system once they take, you know, west slope water over the mountain. I mean, so they need to be at the table helping discuss this because they're now part of the Colorado River system. And storage can be used to meet the requirements, but this needs to have some retooling and some thoughts involved with that. So I guess the main question here, or the discussion item, is how does this affect ag? And it's pretty likely that the lion's share of demand management water will come from ag. And since there's still so many questions to be answered and we're in the preliminary stages of the feasibility, I guess we kind of have some time to look at this, and individual operators have time to look and see how it would affect them. The first one that we need to consider is if we were to participate in something, it's a trade-off between participating now early on, or do we just run the risk of the compact call? You know, I mean, it's going to hurt a little bit probably to our operations if we participate, but I would argue that a compact call would be pretty detrimental to most people's operations. We saw this year how a call in the Yampa was kind of harmful, and that's probably nothing compared to a compact call. Ag water users should be thinking about how voluntary water conservation would affect their operations. This year, I think it was an involuntary water conservation once, you know, because we were so dry. But I mean, so we kind of had to see at how that would work out, but we need to look at it on a voluntary level, you know, and we can kind of manage through that. And relatedly, on point number 3 is the value of water to individual operations. Example, it might be more economical in the short term than raising a crop to lease your water out for demand management, but it might have unintended future consequences. And it's just what we need to evaluate with our own operations, you know, for in the future. So this is kind of me speculating on this, number 4, but I think the extent of our participation might be based on our historic use in the records that we have. Kind of what I mean by this is if someone offers to lease our water they might make the argument, well, why do I want to pay for something that you're not actually using? You know, if you're only using 75% of your allocated water right, you know, why should I have to pay for 25% of it? I mean, so that kind of goes to, we need to be proactive in keeping good records on what we're actually using and diverting. And I found this out, and speaking of abandonment, water right abandonment, is that our participation in demand management or other conservation efforts can help justify the not abandoning of a water right. You know, if you, for a couple of years or a year, if you're participating in a program like this, you know, it's definitely recognized by the Division of Water Resources that you're using that water, even though you're not using on your property, but you're participating in a program like this. So that's about all I have. Are we doing questions now, or?
Yeah, we can do questions.
Jackie, do you have anything you want to add to this or subtract from it?
Jeff's on one, he wants to add or subtract.
Who?
Jeff's on one.
Oh, Jeff.
Did you want Jeff to?
Actually, I have very little to add. Can you hear me okay? Will, can you hear me okay? Okay, you did an excellent job of covering the territory. The first point on your slide here, I think, is one of the most important things that we in the ag community have to think about. No one loves the idea of DM. We often talk about how we wish it would just go away. But the truth is the trade-off between demand management and a compact call is something we really have to think through. And so I think you covered that territory well, and I really don't have anything further to add. Nice job, Will.
Jackie?
Thanks. And great job, Will. Appreciate you being able to pare down the documents that the roundtable's been working on for so long into something so short. I'm sure everyone appreciates that.
That's Jeff.
So since you touched on those local issues, I think, you know, it's important to just talk about where we're at as a state on this program. And, you know, as Jeff said, demand management has been a bit of a thorn in people's side. It's always difficult to think about how you would implement something that's so different from anything that we've really looked at in the past. But that said, I think there are ag users out there, maybe not a lot in this basin, that are interested in seeing how this goes. And I'm sure some of you have heard about what's happening down in the Grand Valley area and some of the water speculation down here, or excuse me, down there, by water asset management and others. And to that end, one of the items that was passed in the 2020 legislative session was a committee to talk about our anti-speculation laws and whether or not there is a need for those to be strengthened. And that committee was formed in July. I'm not sure if it has met yet, but we will hear a report out during this next 2021 legislative session and get a little bit of a better understanding if there are additional parameters that need to be implemented to prevent some of the speculation, or if willing buyer, willing seller is, you know, enough in this case. So I guess that said, I really look at demand management as what we as a state want for our future. And when you look at 50 years from now, who's going to be running the operations, what considerations they're going to need to be making and what changes, if any, to their operations they will need to make in order for them to stay viable, to have something to leave to the next generation, or have something that's sellable that remains in agriculture. I think it's important for us to discuss tools in the toolbox. And that is not to say that I am a fan of demand management. It's been a pain in my butt just as much as it's been a pain in everybody's butt, but it is a tool. And if it is a tool that is utilized to create opportunities that farmers and ranchers wouldn't have, then it's a tool we need to look at. And the voluntary, temporary, and compensated nature of that tool should allow for people to make the decision of whether or not they want to utilize it. And Will brought up the fact that each basin, should be putting in an equitable amount of water if there is to be demand management. And that is one of the issues that will need to be studied if we're to go forward. And I don't want to mince words about the number of issues that need to be considered and looked at if demand management is to be on the table for the future. One of the biggest concerns that I have about demand management is that we really need to make sure that rural communities are talking about what they need for their communities if demand management is to become a tool. So that's to say, you're starting to impact ranchers and farmers in a certain area. Let's take the Yampa Basin. That's going to be harder for them. That's going to be different. Is there a community fund that needs to be set up if demand management is going to take place? And so I think this is something that you need to look at from all angles. And if you hate it, make a comment. Make sure that you're getting your voice heard that you hate it. If you like it, but you're not quite ready to talk about whether or not you like it, make that heard, anonymously. If you have ideas, I certainly want to hear them. There's other people, if you don't know me or don't feel comfortable talking to me, there's other people just in this chat today that would talk to you about it, whether it's Jeff or Will or Patrick, or people like Marcia, Doggenbaugh or Todd Hagenboo, or Al. Let us know how you're feeling, what your concerns are. I would never speak on behalf of agriculture. I'm not a rancher, I'm not a farmer. But like I said, when you look out into the future, we certainly can't be in a position to take things off the table for people until we know whether or not until we know what exactly we are taking off the table. And so just real briefly, I wanted to run through a couple of the questions that we're going to be chewing on if the CWCB in November decides to take the next step and continue researching demand management. And so those are, what does the process look like to get your water right involved in this? Is it administrative? Is it water court? What's the eligibility process look like? How do we measure conserved consumptive use? What kind of formula are we using? How do we verify it? How do we measure it at the state line? How are we funding it? Is it a bottle fee that has been talked about? Is it, funders like the Walton Family Foundation? We don't know how that could happen. Is it, a sin tax, a municipal water fee? There's all sorts of things that have been discussed. But then, like I said before, is there a community fund or a mitigation fund that's set up? There are some precedents set in Palo Verde and Yuma for things like that. And then, how do people feel about how it's funded in general? Are there things that are just a non-starter? And so other questions, timing, when do you do this? What time of the year? When do people sign up? what type of year can you fallow water or fallow your land and send water down? Is it a good year water-wise? Is it an average year? Certainly, it's likely not a drought year. How are people selected? And what is the state's role in this? And so that is, and then of course, a big one is injury. So how do you make sure that you're not injuring people if your water is running past someone else's head gate? Obviously, all this is going to take time. It's going to take money. Like I said, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it's easy or that there's any real answers to this program. But the more that folks like are on this Zoom today, talk amongst yourself, come up with the questions you'd like to see answered, get your voice out there so that we understand what the big concerns and comments are. So I'll get off my soapbox and we'll move forward. Thanks for listening.
Okay. So we've got an ag panel here of experts and folks you've already heard from, Alden and Will, Jackie and Jason. And so what we want to do now is just take a look at some of the questions that we've had. Maybe touch on any questions that our folks here have, scenarios. My next question is for Alden, I think, and that is in regard to funding. And with COVID, with our cratering economic conditions that we've seen, we know that there's been a dramatic reduction in our state budget, which is going to affect our water plan funds. And I wondered if you could speak to what our, for example, water supply reserve fund future looks like over the next 2 or 3 years and this year, both at the roundtable level as well as the state level. And then if you have any information on the water plan funds separate from that.
Well, I really can't respond to the water plan funds. I do know that there is some cash there for that. Jackie may know more about that since she's on the CWCB board. However, our basin roundtable funds that we do have an account balance left. Unfortunately, it's not huge. And we do have a grant process that we are moving forward with. We're trying to adjust our budget, and we'll have continuing discussions with our grant committee and our grant chair for that committee to see how we can extend our grant process so it's just not long. Unfortunately, I was informed here recently that deposits into our basin fund over the next 3 years are going to be very limited. And that's due to the budget cuts that have happened across our state due to our economic changes. So, and in order to keep our state going, our account was one of them that they had to sweep. So we've got several projects that we're going to be scrutinizing more. It will become more competitive, but that's not saying projects still can't be going forward and being done. It just means it's just going to be a better project. Or get your application in there and you might get something in there to where the competition during that application period is low. That's one other opportunity. But projects are grossly scrutinized for the benefit to meet the measurable goals and outcomes. And some of the goals that I shared with you earlier, those are kind of priorities. And we have a ranking system for that. So we do have a grant page on our Yampa-White-Green.com. Please take a look at it. I know we have a grant process I don't know if it's open right now yet today or if that's closed. I'm sorry, I don't have that information right now. But there is some information there for you so you can move forward and become more informed.
Stay there, Alden. I've got one more question for you.
Okay.
So you mentioned that I think you've got 50 projects, plus or minus, that have come in for the basin implementation plan update. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Can you give us a sense for just how do those projects shake out? Are they mostly ag projects? Are they a mix of environmental, recreation, ag, storage, diversion structures, other things?
I just got the updated list yesterday, thanks to one of our local experts. And unfortunately, I haven't had a chance to really digest the whole thing, but I'm going to say the majority of the list does actually lean towards ag and river water supplies. But I can't put a certain percentage to it, Phil, because it's not a 50-50. I know we've got a lot of projects that are water quality related and stream health for the town of Steamboat. Mount Warner's got some stuff going on up there with some of their wells that they got for their water supply. On the White River, we've got other things for recreation base. I know on the Yampa River, there's some about river access points so that they can get for recreation purposes. So there is a good mix of it, you know. Another project that's coming to light, and we all know on the Yampa-White-Green Basin that return flows is a strong livelihood on how we maintain our supplies year round without really digging into our physical storage. This is our subterranean storage that we do with our irrigation. But there's wanting to be more questions about maybe refining that a little bit. But diving into that one, that's a big question. It's going to take a lot of time and a lot of effort because it's so geologically specific. So let's see, there is about irrigation as well, about ditches. There's some questions on there, riparian health. There's parts of that, and there's significant portions on there that deal with the phreatophytes that we have along our river corridors. So I know on the Yampa River, there's a headgate and diversion structure assessment that's part of their IWMP process, and that's moving forward, but that same thing is being developed for the White River. So those are shared projects that we're seeing that are being identified because headgates, you know, it's got to be legal. You got to meet that legal requirement and a flow measurement device, but that's separate from the discussion. They're looking at what the condition of it. Can it help with the fish? Can it help with the riparian? How does it integrate into the whole ditch system in there? So, because you may have a large ditch company that has several diversion structures in there, but how does that ditch system function in there? So those are questions that are kind of being flushed out.
Thanks, Alden. Okay, so we've got, I don't know if we have any other questions, but we've got one on a compact call. This one is for Jason. And the question is, can you help us understand how a compact call, it's a 1922 call, would affect senior water rights versus junior water rights?
Well, let's start from the fact that, first of all, if your water right is senior to the compact, you shouldn't be impacted at all by the compact. And then the question then becomes, in the state of Colorado, we would see, if we do get into a compact situation, the state engineer has the authority to implement compact compliance rules, and they've done it. In fact, the Colorado River Basin is the only basin in the state that does not have compact compliance rules in place, because we've never been in a situation where we've had a compact call. There are a number of different ways in which a compact call could unfold, and you can bet there's probably going to be a lot of litigation around whatever the state engineer's office tries to do in terms of those compact rules. There are a number of people that say, well, it should be by strict prior appropriation. That's how we operate. There are others in basins that develop later, like the Yampa here, who probably wouldn't think that that would be the fairest solution, just because many of the water rights here in this basin would be junior to the other basins within Colorado River. So it's really, as of yet, not quite clear how a compact would be administered. But if you're pre-compact, you're free from the call. Does that help?
All right, this is Patrick Senko from Community Ag Alliance. We're going to close the question session, panel session right now. If you have further questions, you can go ahead and email me at patrick@communityagalliance.org, and that way we can ask the right people and get you the answers that you need. We appreciate that. We have a couple announcements that we want to do, and I'm going to start with Holly. Kirkpatrick from the Upper Yampa Water Conservancy District. She can unmute, and I will share her slides. Share screen. That's what I think I want. Are you there, Holly?
I am. Thank you, Patrick. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with all of you tonight, and I'm happy to see that so many of you joined us this evening. Obviously, there's a presidential debate coming up here soon, so I'm sure everybody wants to wrap up. But I just wanted to share quickly the total of Yampa River system releases from water storage this year. I thought that that might be important to point out, knowing that this was a fairly difficult year, you know, certainly nothing like 2002, but definitely ended up in a call on the Yampa River, and despite that, we still had all of these releases totaling 17,000, almost 17,600 acre feet from reservoirs in the Yampa Basin. So I just wanted to share that with you. I'm not going to walk through that in any great detail, but you're welcome to look that over. And if you have any questions about that, feel free to contact me. And then I also wanted to share with you just a reminder about the Diversion Infrastructure Improvement Project. That is a grant program that we're offering through the Upper Yampa Water Conservancy District. We've partnered with the Yampa-White-Green Basin Roundtable on that to offer funding for the installation of headgates and measuring devices within the district boundaries. So that stretches all the way up the Bear River, a good portion of the Yampa down to Craig, and up the Elk River as well. So if you're installing a measuring device or a headgate this fall, I would really encourage you to reach out. I'll be happy to paste the link to our website in the chat section, and I'll also provide you with my email address and my phone number. Please feel free to contact me directly if you have any questions about that program. We're here to help you guys with some financial assistance in installing those measuring devices and headgates that you're going to have to do anyway. So we're here to help you protect your own water rights.
All right, thank you, Holly. So like I said, I'll leave this up here for a little bit. If you look up the upperyampawater.com, you can find the projects with that information, as well as Holly's. She'll have it in the chat box and her contact information. Thank you. All right, then going on to the final announcement, second to final. Mute. I have Kent Sanderas, who is on the Routt County Conservation District, and they would like to give a quick update. And I got to go.
Patrick, thank you. I appreciate your venue here. I did forward a package of 7 slides to Michelle's address. I don't know if you have that in front of you or not, with that being her computer. Thank you. So just the first slide there, like you've heard before, the connectivity between many of these organizations is invaluable, in that we're here to help, and there's strength in numbers. The Routt County landowners and producers have come together since 1942 to constitute the Conservation District. And Patrick, you can go to the next slide. We're your local connection to NRCS programs and funding. And Patrick, you're just a little bit ahead of me there by a few slides. The long-range plan came about from input at our last annual meeting, and our 3 primary objectives focusing on right now are soil health, rangeland health and forestry, water quality and quantity, or quantity and quality, which we've heard a lot about this evening. Next slide. We're really in the midst of some soil health initiatives consistent with what the state has put forward in their attempt to service the constituency. And why is it important? We really want programs to help improve bottom line of producers and increase our resiliency to drought, better pest resistance, improve surface water infiltration, reducing programs to reduce erosion, and facilitate less sediment infiltration into surface water. Overall, we improve our production. One of the first steps in trying to figure out what our soil health is with our constituents, we want to provide a more comprehensive test venue for people interested. The NRCS is available to help provide technical assistance to not only carry out the test, but to interpret test results and then follow up management plans to improve production and conditions. So anybody interested in that, we have certain funding that will cover the expense for a certain number of tests, and we'll carry that forward into next year. Biggest thing we can do is, if you are interested in that kind of information, let's start a dialogue sooner than later. It will get you signed up for testing results and then the development of a plan to help you with your production. Patrick, our contact information, our participants on the board, you can go to the next slide. You can go to the next slide there. Yep, sign up. We want to do that. Lynn Halliday is our president, Tyler Snyder, our vice president, Cam, our treasurer, Nadine, and Jeremy, both supervisors. We're looking to grow our ranks. We're looking for participation, contribution with ideas and talent. And anything that you'd like to know more about the Conservation District, you can look at the website, DroughtContingency.com, and you can email us at board@DroughtContingency.com.